Three, two, one.
So 10 waiting. Wow, let's go. 7.
Hey everyone, welcome to the fifth episode of Real Time Talk with Eagle 3D Streaming. My name is Quentin Anderson, and I am the host for today's podcast. Our guest today is Lance Van Nostrand. He is a fellow Dallasite, which I am super excited about. And Lance, just to give a little bit of background of his amazing career, Lance is passionate about technology and interactive media. He works at Digital Domain, which is an amazing company, and he is a founding partner at XR Media Group. He's previously held positions with senior leadership roles for companies like Immersive Media and Kodak Research Labs. And his work has resulted in 4.5 patents. I don't know how you get a half patent, but he did. He's also received a crazy amount of industry awards, including Emmys, which is amazing. And he has completed projects for Olympics, X Games, Red Bull Rampage, UFC, among many others. I am extremely excited to have him. Lance, how are you doing today?
Hi, Quentin. Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for making the time to be on the show. I know our listeners are very excited to hear our discussion for today. Before we get started, just to give a little bit of background on the format for this podcast, it's a little different than others. This is a live show. So we do have questions that we receive, and you can post them through the YouTube chat. So if you're watching the show live with us right now, and if you have a question you would ask to Lance, and now's the time because he knows a lot about technology. So you can post it in the chat, and then we'll talk about them during the show, which is 30 minutes. So don't hesitate. Just post the question, and we will try to answer it. But Lance, let's go ahead and get started with the first question. So what kind of projects have you worked on that involve pixel streaming?
Oh, interesting. Well, pixel streaming, Quentin, is very new, right? That there's not a lot of large deployments out there yet, and I hope there will be a lot. So a lot of the things that I've worked on have been part of pitches and demos and things. We did a really nice demo for a client not too long ago for some site planning that really got me thinking about the value of environments and how to bring people into those environments. And pixel streaming has shown itself to be a really good technology for that kind of project work, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, and so let's go back in history a little bit in some of the projects that you've worked on that have kind of led up to working in a project in pixel streaming. So do any kind of come to mind as key or pivotal projects?
Well, I think kind of the road to where we are now kind of goes back to kind of an interest in interactivity and what that all means. My work back at Immersive Media, where we were kind of pioneering in the 360 video space, was kind of a way of trying to take a regular lean back 2D natural video and turn it into something that was more interactive and lean forward, that you had to look around and get involved. And the nice thing about that kind of interactivity, which really attracted me, is that it's a natural kind of extension of the way that we live our lives, right? I mean, not everything is a first-person shooter game. A lot of times you just kind of move through your life and you look around and you discover and you explore. And I was really intrigued by the whole 360 video concept for interactivity. Obviously, it's gone. That technology has kind of gone away, but that led me into AR type projects, and we did a project for Red Bull Rampage a couple of years ago. We did the Rampage AR app, which provided a mountain that was you could kind of drop onto your table, and it was the competition mountain, and the mountain kind of acted as a bit of a directory or a navigation to find interesting geographical features, videos, pictures, things like that. And I could start to see how the kind of the 3D world could act as a bit of a platform for presenting information. And that's kind of continued to evolve. My thinking continues to go down this path, and that's led from AR into VR experiences. And I continue to have this thought about authentic environments and the value of kind of geographic digital twins. So that's where that kind of led me toward a pixel streaming sort of approach. Pixel streaming has a bunch of advantages over other approaches. So I've been kind of focusing on that at the moment.
Yeah, and one of the advantages I would say is interactivity. But that's, one of the things that I'm kind of wondering with some of your projects is it seems that interactivity always finds a way into them. So why is interactivity important for you in the work that you do?
Well, I think interactivity, obviously there's the technical side of being able to deliver these sorts of things, but in the bigger picture, it's how we move through the world, right? It's a natural way for us to learn. When you have an interactive experience, there's more information than you can take in at once. You're not being scripted on exactly how to learn information. You're given some freedom to discover and maybe come back again and again. So, that's one of the things that kind of propelled our content development in the 360 world. And I believe that it is going to be propelling our future world, which if my platform takes off in the future, will be based on pixel streaming, because I think that ability to interact with the world allows content developers to present a lot more content in a way that gives people the flexibility to experience it the way that they want to experience it. And as I said, I kind of was carving out a little world of interactivity that's not the first person shooter really total focus, but the one that's just kind of an extension of the way that we do things. So, if you're if you're trying to plan a trip, or you're trying to learn history, or you're trying to visit a remote location, being able to go to these very information dense locations in a way that allows you to interact in a way that's natural and the way you normally interact with the world. I think it helps build memories. It helps comprehension. It is more engaging.
Sure. So, a pre-made video of a flyover over the Bermudas isn't on the same level as me being able to pick different areas and locations to fly through, get information on the population, dwellings, be able to book a reservation. There's just a different level of immersiveness, would you say? Between the two?
Well, yeah, you can do those things in regular 2D ways, right? It's that ability to be able to do it in a way that feels more authentic that I think is kind of what's interesting to me, right? The concept of a digital twin, it comes up a lot when we talk about these environments, it's one of the concepts that we really try to explore, because, well, the digital twin world that's very popular these days, I kind of think of in a maybe simplified format, but I think of it as being a digital world that you're interacting with, and that's tethered to some other world. That other world actually may be digital as well, but we'll say for argument's purposes, it's a real world. And then there's a bunch of instrumentation in between that kind of connects one to the other. So things are happening in one world, you can kind of monitor the other world. Products like Azure digital twin environment, that's actually a product that kind of works on that middle layer and that communication between the two ends of these worlds. But when I kind of use the term, I kind of think of, I'm more interested in the bookends. I'm interested in trying to represent a really authentic front end world that represents a real world location on the back end as well. And I think when you have that environment, like, if you're going to Bermuda and you want to check out the hotels and the beaches, or make sure how you're going to get to the airport, or where you're going to go jet skiing or whatever, that's this being able to have an environment that gives you a confidence in the truth of what you're seeing, so that when you actually do go to experience it for real, it's not a surprise, right? You didn't look at a picture, a controlled picture that somebody framed perfectly with the exact light, or something that was not really done at high resolution. You're trying to interact with the real world, and when you get there, it's the real thing. And if you can't get there, if you're providing access to environments like say the Iceland glaciers or something that's really difficult to get to, you can still have that feeling of what it would feel like to actually be there, and do it in a way that allows you to explore and have a lot of information. When we did the 360, all you could do was look around, right? And you still had that interaction. Now with 3D and game engines, you can do so much more. And and I think that kind of leads us to the metaverse and the way that people are thinking of the metaverse, or at least, I don't know, I have maybe overly simplified concept of what that is.
Yeah, and I think it's still kind of rapidly evolving, but one thing that comes to mind is you really can't create a rich, or one way to create a rich digital experience is through photogrammetry. And so, how have you used photogrammetry in some of your projects and experiences in the past, and how has that played a role in making kind of these authentic digital experiences?
And I think that's one of the things that I think photogrammetry is a tool that, well, it's kind of essential to my concept of, and it was part of my inspiration to get involved in this concept of geographic digital twinning, but it's not really essential to the platform itself, right? It is a way though to make environments that are accurate, dimensionally accurate, color accurate. They're authentic, and when they're authentic, they feel more true. Now, it can be done other ways. Environmental artists are unbelievable these days, and an environmental artist can make a world that looks very accurate. And an environmental artist can also make an alien planet that looks super cool, or a virtual production set, which are things that I've done in the past, and I know how good these guys really are. But as artists, they're not really constrained by reality, right? And when you do constrain an artist by reality and say make something that looks exactly like a physical location, it takes skill, it takes time, it takes a lot of money. So I think the barrier to scaling any sort of a solution that involves trying to create authentic experiences of real world locations can't really rely, or got to reduce a reliance on environmental artists and find another solution. And photogrammetry kind of fits that very nicely, because it also isn't necessarily cheap and easy yet, although it's getting cheaper and easier with drones and the quality of cameras and such. But what's really powerful about that approach is that it's very pipelineable, right? The process to go to an area, and basically, if people aren't too familiar with what photogrammetry is you take a whole bunch of pictures of an area from multiple angles, and all the pictures overlap, and you put it into some software that's able to identify control points in all of these overlapping videos from different angles, and be able to create a point cloud or reconstruct that space from all of those images, figure out what the color of each one of those pixels should be in the point cloud, and build a mesh. And it's a very engineering, methodical process. And out the other end comes a three-dimensional surface model that can be incredibly accurate. The model that we did for for Rampage, actually the last couple of years, but the one we just did back in October was accurate to a GSD of 2 centimeters over the space, which was about about a third of a mile square. It's a very large area with incredible accuracy. And that was able to be done, without an environmental artist at all.
That's amazing. And I still can't comprehend how you can take just photographs and reconstruct them into a 3D image. But we just had a question coming from the audience, which I think is a very good one, and it's tied to what we're discussing. Other than previewing a location, what other potential business cases that have profit potential, or what are the other potential business cases that have profit potential with digital twins? Could you think of any?
I think. Oh yeah, I think there's a lot, and I think that we're going to find that this kind of, at least I hope that in the future, we're going to find that this becomes a more integral part of our lives, in the way that we kind of plan for travel, the way that events are planned on location, but also the way that we can learn history, and how the world has changed over time, and how things look. We can also have those remote visits, right? Those trips to the Iceland glaciers or the Kilauea volcanoes that we can't get to personally, and still have that immersive experience. So I think that there's, or even if you're just trying to get across town, or get through Disney World, or get through an industrial facility because you're an inspector. I think there's a lot of three-dimensional complicated environments that make sense to map out, that will benefit from the ability to kind of free roam explore, but also allow that free roam exploration to be a bit of a directory where information can be dropped into place, whether it's documents or updated sensors, virtual sensors and pieces of equipment like a regular digital twin, or videos, pictures, and social sorts of applications as well. So I don't know. I kind of rambled on with a bunch of ideas because they're all swimming in your head, but I think that there's a number of applications, and I think that when these applications, see, right now the kind of things that I've been working on, as you said, it hasn't gone real far. The clients that I have now in this area have very specific places that they want scanned, very specific reasons, because there's an event coming up and they need to plan for that event, or they want to. But I think that as more of these environments get mapped and become available, and there's a way to find them, then I think it becomes a more of a natural way for us to, plan, travel, learn, and visit. Because I think that this low level of interactivity is kind of the way that we normally live our lives.
Yeah, and maybe it's like a factory too, when we digitally recreate that, and then it allows engineers to do planning and maintenance based on where certain piping and connections are made. So there's a lot of different types of experiences. I do know that you spent quite a bit of time with VR. Can you share just a little bit of information on how you're bringing interactivity and accuracy to the MLK experience that you did with VR?
Yeah, sure. The March is what that experience was. It's an LBE. It's in museums in the country now. It's in the public, and it was in. The concept was to reconstruct the 1963, I guess it's the "I Have a Dream" speech is what everybody says, but the day was called, they were marching for jobs and freedom. So in that experience, you're kind of transported to kind of key moments of the day. And you're not really in each location for very long, but it is completely a free roam experience. It's a VR experience, and you're dropped into different key locations with certain things that were happening during the day. You're not really on a quest. So the point of the free roam and the immersion is just to sell that feeling of really being there and having sights and sounds and experiences that are as accurate as possible. And the goals of the MLK Foundation and Time, who was the sponsor for this, were, I guess, accuracy and accuracy. I mean, accuracy was really what it was all about, because as a museum experience, they really felt like everything in there had to be correct, right? The clothes that people wore, the sounds that you heard had to be as correct as possible. Everything had to be perfect. So when we built the VR experience, we did volumetric capture of characters. We had people wearing proper period clothes. We used real audio from the day. We had lots of videos that we then reconstructed in VR. And of course, the big moment is Dr. King's speech. There's 5 minutes of the speech in the experience, and that was done by a professional actor, but it was also his face itself was reconstructed using Digital Domain's proprietary technology to do all that facial reconstruction, with the intent of trying to make things as accurate as possible. I don't know. You have time for a side story?
Yeah.
There was one point while we were doing all the research where we're working on the storyline, and the director saw this as one thing, as a great opportunity. There's a story about Mahalia Jackson yelling out to Dr. King while he's doing the speech. You may not know it, but the speech, his whole "I Have a Dream" thing was not scripted. The first part of his speech was scripted, and then when the last 5 minutes of his speech, he kind of went off script. That's what everybody remembers. It's kind of amazing. And if you look on Wikipedia, there's you'll see some references to where Mahalia Jackson, who was a very close friend, made some comment like, "Tell him about the dream, Martin," or something like that. And the director was very interested in broadening out the participants in the VR experience and maybe bringing that in as an interesting storyline. But everything had to be proven. We couldn't go on Wikipedia as accurate information. And while we were working on this, apparently some recordings from the day had been discovered in the basement of a New York recording studio. This was amazing, because all of the recordings that we had that were around back in the day, everything was on magnetic tape. Everything was then kind of produced into a final recording. They didn't keep all the ISOs and all the RAWs like we do today. So the only recordings we had had already been kind of pre-produced, where the crowd noise had been filtered out. So if Mahalia Jackson had actually said something like that, we would have never have heard it, right? So we couldn't use that information. But they found these raw tapes from the day, from one of the microphones that was right up in front. And we were like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic!" So awesome. The studio in New York sent a person. It was super high security, because this is now a valuable tape, right? They didn't know they had it, but it's super valuable. So they had this guy fly out to LA, and he shows up in our studio. All the producers are around. He comes in with his briefcase, has to call home to get the code to open the briefcase. You feel like you're in Mission Impossible or something, and puts the tape in, and we listen to this tape, and it goes through the whole speech, and it's noisy, and you can hear all this background noise. And we listened to it again, and we listened to it again, and we could not find this comment, right? And we're thinking, if she made this comment, we would have heard it, because we're hearing right from his podium all this background noise. We're hearing all of it, right? Now, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. They were really close friends. She could have, had some shortcut way of communicating and all that bit, but we couldn't prove it, so we couldn't put it in the VR experience. That was the level to which the team went to make sure that everything in there was as accurate as possible.
That is so cool. I mean, just to think to have access to that type of like historical data, and just the level of detail and thought going into those experiences. That's so cool. We did get another question in from the audience. It sounds like they're interested in photogrammetry. So we are kind of running into our half hour. It goes kind of quick, but are you up for one more question about photogrammetry?
Sure. Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. So besides drones, what other tech is used for capturing photogrammetry, and what is the average storage requirements for acquiring the point cloud data?
Well, it depends on the size of the area and what it is you're trying to capture. Most people get started with photogrammetry by grabbing a DLSR and taking some pictures of an object around their house that isn't all that large that they can get on. What's important for photogrammetry is making sure that you have overlapping images from multiple angles, right? So some of the rigs that we use for terrestrial sort of capture, it depends on what you need. If you just need, like, say, the outside of a building, but you don't care what the roof looks like, or you can put the roof on with an environmental artist later, you can walk around a building with a camera rig, and you could use an individual camera, or you could build a board with a couple of cameras on it facing in off angles. So as you move along, they're taking pictures that are overlapping and from different angles, and then you can use those. If you do need a full 360, over the top and all that bit, it's just hard to do that without a drone. Drones really are a great way to do that. Now, the size of the area that you're trying to cover is going to regulate how many pictures you're going to have. So higher resolution cameras can be very helpful. In the Red Bull case, we used a Matrice drone, which carries a pretty big payload, and we used a phase 1 camera, which is a 100 megapixel camera, fantastic camera, and that allowed us to have the number of photos that we took reduced from a crazy number. Like we'd done a pre-scan of the area just using the Hasselblad camera on the top of a DJI drone, and we took about 3,000 photos, and we could take less than half of that with the phase 1 because it was a higher resolution, and still get the amount of overlap that we needed and the accuracy. Once you have all those pictures, it is an enormous data set. So I said before that it's a pipelinable process. It is a pipelinable process, but it is, depending on the size of your system, it can get to a point where, you're really pushing the boundaries of what your laptop can do. You're going to have to upgrade to a bigger computer, or begin to start to partition an area into chunks and build them separately and then put them together later. So, there is a kind of, the way that I always think of it is there's a certain number of pixels that any individual computer can process. And it's fairly large, let's say, my fairly beefy home laptop can do, can build a model that has 6 million vertices and then load it up in Unreal with no problem. But at some point you can exceed what one computer can do, and you have to start breaking things up into others. On the Rampage job, we ended up producing an 8K texture for the overall, the final look. And that's important. So when you think of photogrammetry, there's two sides of it. There's building the mesh, and then there's building the texture that goes on top of the mesh. You can get away with a much lower resolution mesh if you're not going to do a lot of collision work, right? If you just want to look at something and have it really look nice. So say for a virtual production set where you're going to use these assets on TV, what's most important is basically getting the general shape, but then having a real high resolution texture. When you get into the game world and the pixel streaming world, and you want people to actually get down and interact within an environment, then where rocks are, where trees are, where buildings are is very important, and you would collide with them, if you flew through them. So you need more vertices in your model, along with the texture. That's when the needs go up for systems. Now that's we get back to pixel streaming. Pixel streaming is actually a really nice way to deliver that kind of high-end content. It's what I've come to believe at the moment is it's a fantastic way for delivering this high-end quality to end clients. Number one, because it's a very low barrier to entry, right? People can get into a 3D environment without having to put on a VR headset. So it's easy for people to access a 3D environment. And it means their computer, and everyone's got a cell phone, so it's got the widest reach. And then on the back end, we're leveraging game engines, and game engines are obviously a great tool for building very rich and interactive environments. But the other thing is that because they're running on a game engine in the server environment, you have a lot more control over what the quality is that's being delivered to all of the clients. And in fact, even in the delivery of that quality, you have some advantages. Whereas in the VR world, you really need to be able to deliver updates to headsets at 90 frames a second, 72 frames a second. 11 millisecond latency or so is where your brain starts to detect that things are wrong, and you can start to get that VR sickness. But with pixel streaming onto a device, onto a laptop, your brain recognizes that portal is not your entire world. So it is way more forgiving in terms of dealing with latency or skips or whatever, and it doesn't even see some of this stuff. So it provides it's a more forgiving channel, and it's a more forgiving display.
Yes, yeah, the barriers to entry are a little lower for a browser-based game engine stream versus a VR-based game engine stream. Lance, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today. And I felt like we didn't even scratch the surface. So if you're open to it, maybe we can have you on again at some point. But thank you, everyone who posted questions today. We really appreciate that. We want to make this as interactive and as meaningful for you as possible. So thank you very, very much for doing that. We definitely encourage it. Please catch us next time for episode 6, where we will be sitting down with another guest. I am Quentin Anderson. This is Eagle 3D Streaming Real-Time Talk, and we will catch you next time. Lance, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Quentin. I enjoyed it a lot.
And we are